Hey everybody, Chris here. If you've been listening to these episodes celebrating Wolfgang, then you already know that the climbing at Mount Arapiles, including the route we're talking about in this episode, Punks in the Gym, Wolfgang's famous first 14A, is at risk of being closed without input from climbers or the nearby town of Natimuc. There's a link in the show notes for a great video on the issue, as well as a change.org petition that you can sign. Thanks. You know what I did recently? Me, this person who doesn't like shopping and doesn't like to buy new things, I decided that I like my Rab Ascender light hoodie so much that I bought 2 more. Different colors, of course, but I just want to wear the thing all the time, and now I can. And Rab are generously supporting this entire season of Written in Stone. They're dedicated climbers themselves, and they channel this expertise and passion into their designs. Nothing fancy or over-engineered, just honest, hardworking gear you'd rather repair than replace. And someday I'll need all 3 repaired, so I appreciate that. And here's another thing. Rab has agreed to give away a few of these hoodies, which we'll be doing soon inside of our Patreon, the Secret Stoners Club. You can join for free at the link in your show notes. This episode is also brought to you by Tension Climbing, where you can use the code WRITTEN15 for 15% off of select items, and by Power Company Climbing, where you can use the code STONE for 20% off of most training plans, products, and books. Shortly after my own trip to the Grampians and Araps, where I played briefly on Punks in the Gym, just to give it, as Ben Cossey would say, a tummy rub, I went back to the Blue Mountains where I met a bunch of Australian mega crushers. One of those crushers was Andrea Hah. And because she was the first Australian woman to climb Punks in the Gym, and Arapiles had a big impact on her life, I really wanted to have her on the show. Andrea is not only a mega crusher and one of the most accomplished climbers in Australia, she's also a physio at Move Clinic, which she runs with her partner, Ben Cossey, also a mega crusher, and she's a mom to a little BMX shredder. Basically, an all-around badass. We talk Araps and Punks, as well as other Australian history, like her send of Ozymandias, which was the first ground-up in-a-day ascent of the route done by anyone, and her arch-nemesis climb, Lord of the Rings, in Araps. Let's get into it. Well, I just want to jump in, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
I want to read pieces of 2 different Instagram posts of yours as a jumping off point for this conversation. The first one says, I've been thinking about Mount Arapiles a lot lately. It's a magical place that changed the trajectory of my life after first visiting in 2005. Not just a slight veer to the side, but a flip it upside down, defer postgraduate studies, quit my jobs, climb overseas, and move to the Blue Mountains kind of influence. I often wonder, how can a series of sandstone edges, slopes, and pinches be so enchanting? Time and time again, I can never have enough. And then the other one I want to read says, 10 years and 4 days ago, I sent a route that wasn't even a dream. When I first went to Araps in 2005, Punks in the Gym seemed inconceivable. I didn't even dare to dream of trying it, let alone doing it. But somewhere along the way, I dared to try, and bloody hell, I'm glad I did. It's a timely reminder for me to keep my mind open and continue to dream big. You were the first Australian woman to climb Punks, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The first woman that did Punks in the Gym was Mayan.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, she's from New Zealand. And then I was the second. Yeah. And still only the Australian, actually.
Oh, really? Can you tell me what it felt like when you were first making the decision to try it? Because it said when you first went, it wasn't even something you imagined doing.
Yeah.
How did you make that decision to get on it?
Yeah, I think these things take time. Like when I first started going to Arapiles, I was pretty young. I was just starting uni, so I was like 18 or so. Hadn't had a lot of experience climbing outdoors, or virtually none. So Arapiles just is really, really good for beginning, learning how to climb outdoors, just the whole process of of the outdoors. I remember looking at it and just thinking, oh, that's just a inconceivable ambition, because I didn't really hadn't really seen that process for myself. But then over the years, I think the more you get immersed in climbing, and for me, the progression, so just slowly doing the routes, like just working your way up the grades and doing different climbs, it just gives you that little bit of confidence to think, oh, maybe that is a possibility for me. I think a really big thing was, like, my boyfriend at the time, he came, we went to Europe for a year, came back, and he essentially said, I'll see you after I've done punks. He put life on hold, and he got it done. And I thought that was really inspiring to make that big of a, put life on hold, and it's really important to get that route done. So I just needed the time to be right for me in terms of when I was physically able, and just also have the stars align with life not getting in the way.
Yeah. Something you just said sort of surprised me. You went there for the first time without much outdoor climbing experience. But in your post, you talk about going there and that flipping your life upside down. Was that based off of that first trip? Like, I went to Arapiles, one of my first times climbing outside, and now I have to change my whole life?
It was probably a slower moving process than that. But, I climbed indoors for a couple of years, just at the local climbing gym while I was at high school. Then I started going to Arapiles, every weekend that I possibly could, every uni break that I possibly could. And it was one of those things I just couldn't see life without climbing. But at that stage, you don't really, well, especially at the time in Australia, you don't think that it could be your full life. Like, everyone needs a job and everyone needs to make a living or some kind of career. You don't really imagine that it could be climbing. So that's been a pretty evolving process over a long time.
Yeah, I also hadn't thought about Arapiles as a good beginner area, but it absolutely is. Now that you say it, it makes perfect sense. And I hadn't thought of it just because of the history of the place. Like, one of the first things I wanted to do when I went there was go see punks and go to the top of punks however I got there, and I just had to. But it hadn't occurred to me how amazing it would be as a place to learn to climb outside.
The rock quality is so good. Like, if you imagine some places, like potentially the harder routes are better quality and the stuff on the side is less good quality, whereas at Arapiles, everything is really good. So the first route that I did there was Tiptoe Ridge, which I think at the time got a grade 4 or something in Australian grades. And we just soloed up. It was amazing. The rock felt super solid, felt really safe. And you just, scurry up for, I think it's something like a 6-pitch route. But it's just so amazing for people that have never climbed before.
Yeah, I imagine. Like, I remember thinking when I went there, and one of the first routes I did there was Kachung. And I remember thinking, like, I came from the Red. That's where I sort of grew up climbing, where the rock could break at any time. But when I was climbing Kachung, it was like, oh, I can understand why this place is such a good place to solo, because you're pretty positive of the rock.
Yeah, from holding the rock, but also from a traditional gear point of view as well.
Totally.
Like, there are gear placements almost everywhere, and really good quality gear placements. It's not like you put it in and you wonder if the rock around it's going to crumble. It's just really solid. So I think starting out trad climbing there, it just feels really safe.
When you did decide to do punks, talk me through your experience on it. In one of your posts, it says it was a pretty smooth, no epics. kind of a journey. And I think that's while we tend to like romanticize the epics and, the big long-term drawn out projects that take forever, there's also a real beauty and value in these. This was my process and I got the thing done and it happened efficiently. And there's something really special about that as well. So talk me through that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Some people like to hear the story of the really big struggle and overcoming that struggle and then hooray, victory. But for me, for punks, it just really wasn't that big of a process. I just finished my master's studying, so I'd had a pretty busy year, not a lot of climbing. And then I tried to get a couple of jobs, but I can't say that I was particularly inspired
you weren't
to
trying
try
that
really
hard to get the jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a really nice summer of just going climbing a lot. So there was a new crag in the Blue Mountains. Well, not that new, but relatively new crag in the mountains, which was called Elphinstone. So I was climbing there a lot. And for me, it's just one of those pretty special summers where you're just doing routes that you didn't conceive doing. So I did my first grade 33, which is like European 8C. Did another
Was that Tiger Cat? Was that
exactly.
your first?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Tiger Cat. I just felt really good. So the timing was right to decide to go to Arapiles and essentially go there and camp at the Pines and stay there until I got that climb done. So it was really nice going there without the pressure of feeling like you're on a road trip with a real deadline. Knowing that I was going there in good form, had time, and just got to take my time with it, like not feel any pressure. The first female ascent had been done, which wasn't ever a concern for me. I didn't feel like I was aspiring to get that title or anything. It's just that the timing was right for me. Yeah.
Do you think that Mayan having done it before you took some of the pressure off even?
Potentially, but I don't think it was that big of a deal in my mind.
Yeah.
Like with other routes that I've done in the Blue Mountains, like even Tiger Cat and Bandula, I never felt the pressure of trying to do the first female ascent. It was just always about me and trying to do that climb. So
yeah. Is that usual for you that you don't feel pressure on hard things?
I think I do surrounding like trying the actual route, but en route don't generally get too much of a pressure, except for another route called Lord of the Rings, which is probably my nemesis project, which has
that's
turned
your
into
Arapiles nemesis.
Yeah, that's turned into my, maybe one day I'll do that route, but yeah.
Well, I do want to come back to that, but let's continue with punks for a minute. I'm assuming you're not the infinite level of frother that Ben is about Wolfgang. Is that right?
I don't know if many people are.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I accused him of being obsessed with Wolfgang, and he didn't like the word obsession. He was more comfortable with total froth dog. That fit him better, I think. So
yeah.
Did the history play into it at all for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in climbing there's the iconic routes that you hear about when you're young, and then you often think about being one of those people that do those climbs, and it's just a really special thing to be one of those people that do it. I mean, the history around it being Wolfgang's route, and just, he was such a legend. Is really special for sure. And also just at a place that, I started climbing where I was really like I was such a bumbly when I first started going outdoors. I'm thinking, oh, the sun is amazing. I want to climb in the sun. And seconding up grade 15s and thinking if I do 2 of those in a day, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so to see that transformation throughout my climbing life, it's really special.
I have a hard time imagining you as bumbly at anything, but I'll take your word for it. Well, I think you just hit on something really important, and that's this like personal history that we have with these routes as well. Like there is the history of the thing that Wolfgang did it. There's the interesting history of the bird bath, right near the top of the route, and that all plays a part. But there's also something special that you've connected to with that place, with the rock there, with the time you've spent there, that has to come into play with these things. And I think that's such an overlooked part a lot of the time. It's like I've created this special connection with this thing, even though I haven't even tried it yet. I'm connected to the surrounding area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what's been really special with my time in Arapiles, it's felt like I've had my own little journey there, and I've seen a lot of iterations of myself climbing there. So starting really young, learning how to trad climb through to, I had a really long time not going there. Like I went sport climbing for a fair while. So I almost went from climbing in grade 20 to the next time I went back there trying punks. So there's this really big gap in between, which felt kind of crazy in not doing all of those steps between that at Arapiles. But I thought, well, I've got the fitness and I think I've got the ability. So I may as well do that and then work my way down.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to another point that I think is really interesting in the research I've done on you is you sort of have done quite a few of these historic routes. One of those being Freerider, one of those being Ozymandias. Is that how you say it? Ozymandias, right?
Ozymandias, yeah.
And when you did Ozzy, you had only climbed grade 21 on gear. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ozzy's 28.
Yeah.
And you, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you were the first person to do it ground up in a day and the first person to flash the crux pitch. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where does that confidence come from?
I think that route was a little bit of an anomaly for me. Well, it felt like it at the time. I think for all people, you have a little bit of an imposter syndrome as to whether you see yourself doing these iconic routes. You don't necessarily see yourself as the equivalent of someone that can do something like a Wolfgang route or something like Ozymandias when you've only done a grade 21 trad. But I think with having the background of doing trad climbing at Arapiles up to grade 21 and then going off and doing sport climbing up to grade, I think I'd done a 31 or so at the time. You just put those pieces together and just got lucky. The situation with Aussie was a little bit unfortunate. Like I'd gone there with my boyfriend and he was trying it, and so I was facilitating for the first day, and then he hurt himself, like he dislocated his shoulder on that crux pitch because it's this corner route that's really technical and you're kind of stemming up the side, and I think his foot popped and his shoulder then popped out. Yeah. So then I went back the next day essentially as a gear retrieval process, but I thought,
oh wow,
what the hell, like I'll just give it a go. So woke up at 4 a.m, went down there and just left the ground with an open mind, and just one of those moments where you just get into a complete flow state and you just climb. There's no pressure, there's no expectation, just found myself at the anchors, just completely surprised at what had just happened. So from there, I think that was really nice. There was no pressure.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing. Like there's definitely research that says if we can trick ourselves into trying a thing that we might otherwise think is too hard, we often have the ability to do that thing. That's the research is done on things like lifting weights, where it's a quick, brief thing. You do it, you thought it was lighter, and then it's over. It's not on a thing that's many pitches and a lot of climbing. You had a lot of opportunities to convince yourself that you couldn't do it. But and to put pressure on yourself once you had gotten halfway through. You're like, oh no, maybe I could do this. There are a lot of opportunities to put pressure on yourself. I think it's really remarkable that you don't add that unnecessary pressure in. You just accept the situation for what it is and keep going.
Yeah, it's a really hard balance to strike, especially as someone that's quite ambitious. I think you definitely have that expectation or like want to achieve, like quite ambitious in setting those goals. And I think you have to leave the ground believing that you can. I think if you leave the ground thinking that you can't, then there's no point in going up it, really. Like you're essentially going up to have a look. But if you can leave the ground with an open mind and have that confidence to think, well, what the hell? Let's just give it a go and see what happens. I think that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, totally. I want to bring that idea back to punks for just a minute. And then I want to get into Lord of the Rings a little bit because I want to hear about the nemesis. But digging into your process a little bit more, do you recall, I know it was a long time ago at this point, but do you recall when the moment was that you knew you could get it done and you were going to get it done? Did that happen before you got on it, or was that something that happened while trying it?
No, I definitely wasn't sure going there. I think the thing with that route, I didn't know if I'd be able to do all of the moves. It's one of those routes where you don't know if there's alternate sequences or if there's these sneaky moments that are not really a crux but could be a crux for you. Like I'm not super tall, and there's also some certain styles of move that I find really hard. So a little bit unsure going into it, but after a couple of days, managed to work out all of the moves. And did it with a different sequence to how Mayan and Mina did the bird bath move. Yeah, like I think there's some people that prefer that more static style, like going up to the bird bath with their left hand. But for me, the traditional kind of drive-by snatch to the bird bath worked really well for me. And I think as soon as I could do that move, I knew that I just had to piece it together. I think just having that background of knowing once I can do the moves, the route will come together.
Yeah, that's such an important thing too. I think a lot of people don't look back into their past process and realize that, oh, once I could do all of the moves on this thing, I should have known there was a chance. And if you can realize that, you can find a chance in a much harder thing down the road.
Yeah, I think, if anything of red pointing over the last 15 years has taught me, the sequences just come together. They get more efficient. They get easier. And if you can scratch your way through a crux and get to the next rest, chances are, if you can keep your head together, it'll come together. And also good conditions. I'm also learning that helps a lot.
That's a thing you're just now learning, is that good conditions
Oh,
help?
it fluctuates. I think sometimes my stubbornness wants to will it better and say it doesn't matter, but it really does.
Yeah, the Alex Magos approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, conditions don't matter until they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. When did you first try Lord of the Rings? Because there's also a history with that route. I think it's Stefan Glovac, is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's
And then
correct.
there's the famous photo of John Sherman on it in his
Mm-hmm.
flip-flops, the
Yeah.
staged photo.
Yeah.
I assume you can just kind of step off of that block onto the wall. Is that right?
No.
Is
No,
that how they staged it? How
no,
did they
I don't.
stage it?
I think the story is he dropped his harness and rope, but it's the wall behind is definitely not a stepping distance away.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
It's really
ridiculous then.
sketchy. Yeah. um,
Wow.
yeah, I first tried Lord of the Rings that same trip actually. I did punks and everyone around me was like, well, what about Lord of the Rings? That's the next obvious, iconic, historical route to do there. It gets a lot less attention, but, would have had just as much attention probably back in the 80s. Yeah. So tried it, but I think I was really tired. I think I was super focused on punks. Had a lot going on personally, and then trying to do that route. I think there was this big adrenaline push with getting that route done.
Yeah.
And then I just was a bit tired after. I actually had like an infected blister on my toe that came a couple of days later. And I don't know if anyone's had like a stubbed toe or a wound on their foot and you try and put a climbing shoe on and then try and climb I call it an overhanging slab, which kind of doesn't really make sense, but it climbs like a slab, but is slightly overhanging. And it was just torturous.
All your weight on that blister.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had to get my friend who's a doctor to like lance it and clean it out. I was like, oh my God, I got to go home. This is not working. Yeah.
So the wheels were just falling off on that first attempt.
Yeah.
First trip.
Got so slammed on that route. And it was interesting because I thought, oh no, I'm amazing. I just did punks. But no, that route shut me down.
Climbing has a way of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great equalizer. When did you go back?
Probably the next year. Yeah, it was not that long. I definitely felt pretty inspired to try and do that climb. I don't think I realized how much punks suited me. Like, I think punks suits me really well. The style of the climbing, it's quite technical. Short little bouldery sections to good rests. Quite a snatchy style is quite fine. But going on Lord of the Rings, I realized it was a very different thing, which highlighted all of my weaknesses.
Yeah. Is it something that's still in your, is it a thing you want to get to? Is it a thing you should get to but don't really want to? What's the feeling around it now?
Depends on which day you ask me, probably.
Yeah.
I probably think about it most days.
Really?
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. I think, the motivation for it and its priority has ebbed and flowed over the years.
Sure.
Yeah. There were a couple of years that I went there a couple of times a year. And it's not super far from where I live, but it's still
it's pretty far.
It's a 12-hour drive. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty far.
It's not a let's go for the weekend kind of place. So I spent a fair bit of time going there. Fell off high, like at the like going for the last bolt section. And then I think it definitely became one of those mental struggles with that route. Couldn't really leave the ground thinking I could do it. Got so furious with it, like super conditions dependent, super sharp thin holds, really bad for your skin on a road trip. Always on a road trip with an end date, which felt hard just with the pressure.
Sure.
So then if it was a bad conditions day, I would just go, no, I just want to get this link because I need to feel good. And then I'd split a tip, and then that would be it for ages. So I had a big break from it. I went back a few years ago. But yeah, I still think about it, definitely.
Yeah, and I imagine it's probably harder now with a career, business, child. I imagine it's probably harder to get back there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think earlier on, like my husband and I, Lee, would go away climbing, and that felt really nice. You could go on a holiday and each have your project, but I think Lee has done every possible link up of that wall now. he's kind of running out of stuff to do there. So I feel a little bad for making him come out and hang out in the gully with me.
He just needs to go out for support mode now. That's 100% support mode. There are no more link ups to do.
No, he's done that a lot. The last couple of years, he's been there, support mode, hanging out with our son, trying to stop him from falling down the gully. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's theorize for a minute here. I've seen this happen with several parents in the last decade or so. What if Max is 6 now? In 6 or 7 years, when Max does punks, are you then going to suggest Lord of the Rings to him?
To put the drawers on for me?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'd love it if Max got into climbing. Even so, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's been proposed quite a few closures happening at Mount Arapiles this year.
Yeah, I have. In fact, in the beginning of this episode, in the beginning of all these Wolfgang episodes, I'm trying to send people to the petition to get more people to sign it. So this is another reminder. Go sign that petition when this episode's done. Yeah,
we really appreciate it. It's been really encouraging, actually, as to how many people feel really strongly about Arapiles and the closure of these places. But yeah, Punks actually, it's well, maybe this is part of your series, but it's its 40th anniversary this year. Yeah. So, we've been thinking about maybe just going down there. I highly doubt I'll be able to chuck a lap on it, but just be nice to go down and have a feel of the holds and, remind yourself how good that climb is. I don't know, Max might appreciate a bit of a slab scramble at the start, but yeah, if he, in 6 years' time, if that climb is still open, I would love that.
Yeah, totally. I joked about that with Ben. I asked him if his family, the Cossey Hah family, have the most ascents of punks of any family in the world, and I suppose it probably does. And if Max does it, it's a for sure thing.
Yeah. Well, there'd be 3 of us. And if Max does it, fingers crossed, he gets good enough soon enough. Yeah.
I love that place, that route has such a palpable. It's such a palpable thing to you all that you're considering driving 12 hours just to go up it again, just to remember in case it does get fully shut down. That's a That's a really powerful thing to consider. And I think people don't often think about those things until it's too late, or, until it's a trip they can't ever go on again or something like that, taking the time to appreciate this thing that means a lot to them. So I love that you're just putting that out there, that we might drive 12 hours across this continent just to go touch this rock again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's more than just that particular climb. I mean, it's really nice just getting in the car, like having that road trip to go down there, camping at the Pines, like doing all the easy multi-pitches with my son. And I think that climb, it's interesting how many people just walk past it just to have a look at it, like in the process of me trying it, or, if I'm trying a climb in the surrounding areas, I'd always stop underneath it and look up. And yeah, I think even other people that haven't climbed the route and potentially thinking maybe one day they might, but they stop and they look up and they look at the bird bath and they look at the tricky technical slab at the start and the top out that people think is not the crux, but still many people have fallen off up there. It's amazing that something so simple can stop so many people just to stop and reflect and admire.
Well, Andrea, thank you a ton for taking the time to sit down. I know you're busy and you have to be plotting that next Lord of the Rings trip too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, not ready to give up on that one yet.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing when you do it.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.
1, 2.
Written in Stone is produced by me, Chris Hampton, with help from Riley Rush for Plugtone Audio, a group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. Don't forget to sign up for our free Patreon so that you can be entered to win one of the Rab hoodies we'll be giving away soon. And remember, this show is 100% rooted in the facts, but like Todd Skinner always said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. If you love what you're hearing, give us those 5 stars and a glowing review, join the Secret Stoners Club, and tell everyone you know at The Crag, on the interwebs, and yes, of course, I also want you to tell those punks in the gym, and together we can tell the stories of climbing's most important ascents, one decade at a time. Secret Stoners. My voice sounds like it's recovered a little bit. I wasn't sure. I was very tired earlier today because I was narrating the next story episode. And it was way longer than I thought it was when I started writing it. It's a long one. That seems to be happening a lot these days. Before I go any further, shout out to our newest rock star, David Singleton. As always, I appreciate the support so much. Also, thanks to those of you who commented on my post this weekend. I had just a wild thought as I was researching this next story, and I was watching some old Masters of Stone videos, and they were so funny. And I have some of those people's phone numbers in my phone, and I just wanted to call some of them and go, what on earth were you thinking? That I thought it might be fun to do reaction style videos to some clips from those old Masters of Stone, or, any of the old climbing films from the 80s, from the 90s. And if possible, call up the actors, the subject, the climbers, and get their thoughts on it now. That'd be really fun. So that's just an idea I have for the off season. When the season is done, over the summer, maybe I do a few of those. Anyway, totally sidetracked already, and we haven't even gotten started. This conversation with Andrea Hah was so much fun for me. I just remember being in awe of her in general. She's so quiet and such a crusher. And I went over to her house to chat with her partner, Lee, who was on the podcast. And she makes a very brief appearance in there. But I did get to chat with her a little while we were there. And I wished I would have gotten over there earlier and been able to record with both of them. So I'm glad that this worked out. And, you know, something when I was listening back and editing this episode, something that I find really funny is when you're talking to really good climbers and you ask them about something like confidence or belief in themselves, one of two things happens. Usually, they either give you this long-winded answer that they've essentially been preparing, that really is kind of far off base of any evidence, or they just go, yeah, duh. And Andrea very much gave me the, yeah, what don't you understand sort of answers, which just says how good she is at tapping into these performances. I think that's very cool. And it's very cool to hear coming from someone who isn't outspoken, larger than life kind of a character. All right. If you listen to the last episode's Secret Stoners Club, you know about the magazine debacle. I have a meeting today, as some of you are listening to this, with the Knowles folks. So hopefully we get that straightened out. I was able to sort out the research I needed for this next upcoming episode, and it's recorded, and I'm just working on the music, so it will be coming out on time. We have not been thwarted. We shall continue, or as Chris Kalous and the Enormocast would say, we will continue with style. And I'm feeling more caught up, feeling like I was hitting a stride here. However, my voice is tired, so I am getting off of here. And I have a lot of music to make. But we do have RAB giveaway coming soon. I just got the next giveaway after RAB stuff in the mail today. I can't tell you what it is because it relates to our next story episode. Actually, it relates to this whole season, but a big part of it relates to this next story episode and one of our guests. So I'm not going to tell you what that is until the episode with that guest. But I also have another bonus episode coming for you. I'd almost forgotten about it until I started in on this next story episode. A song I wrote a long time ago that I dug out of an old hard drive. I don't even know how it got on a hard drive because I'm pretty sure I made it in the CD era. Maybe that's not true. Gotta be true. I was slow to switch, so must have been the CD era for me. But somehow it made it onto a hard drive, and I found it, and I'll be releasing that for you all as well, along with this next story episode. All right, coming next week, next Monday. Oh, actually, you got a bonus episode yesterday. You're getting another bonus episode tomorrow. This is a big week for you guys, but coming on Monday, we are shifting gears. We are coming back to the U.S., who have been pretty much left behind until a superstar from a just recently bygone era decides to invent a new game. I'll see you then.